On count 4, for the first-degree murder of Xana Kernodle, I sentenced the defendant to a fixed term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a fine of $50,000, and a civil penalty of $5,000 payable to the family of the victim.
On July 2, 2025, the air was thick with anticipation, grief, and a tension that had been building for 30 long months. Families of 4 murdered college students sat rigid in their seats, eyes fixed on the man at the defense table. Bryan Kohberger, 30 years old, with a fresh haircut and wearing a button-down shirt and paisley tie, sat expressionless. For 2.5 years, he had maintained his innocence. For 2.5 years, the families had waited for answers. And then, in a matter of minutes, everything changed. Judge Stephen Hippler's voice cut through the silence. Did you, on November 13th, 2022, enter the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder? The question hung in the air. Kohberger's response was chilling in its simplicity. Yes, it was the first time the public had heard directly from the lone suspect in a crime that had shocked the nation. The judge continued, methodically reading each victim's name. Did you kill and murder Kaylee Goncalves? Yes. Did you kill and murder Madison Mogen? Yes. Did you kill and murder Xana Kernodle? Yes. Did you kill and murder Ethan Chapin? Yes. 4 yeses that confirmed what prosecutors had alleged all along. He did it. In the back of the courtroom, a woman silently wept, her tears falling onto a Kleenex clutched in trembling hands. It was Kaylee Goncalves' aunt, and her silent sobs were the only audible emotion in a room otherwise frozen in stunned disbelief. This was the moment that countless people had been waiting for since November 13th, 2022, when 4 vibrant young lives were brutally extinguished in their sleep. But to understand the magnitude of this confession, we need to go back to the beginning, to a cold autumn night in Moscow, Idaho, when a college town's sense of safety was shattered forever. November 12th, 2022 began like any typical Saturday night in a college town. Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogen, both 21 years old and best friends since childhood, were out enjoying themselves at a local bar. Xana Kernodle, 20, and her boyfriend Ethan Chapin, also 20, attended a fraternity party on the University of Idaho campus. The 4 were young, ambitious students with bright futures ahead of them. By all accounts, it was an ordinary evening of college socializing. They returned to the 3-story rental house. The house was a typical student dwelling in the quiet neighborhood just blocks from campus. Sometime after 4 o'clock in the morning on November 13th, as the residents of King Road slept, a figure approached the house. According to prosecutors, Bryan Kohberger, then a 28-year-old PhD criminology student at nearby Washington State University, parked his white Hyundai Elantra and made his way to the residence. What happened next would become one of the most horrific crimes in Idaho's recent history. Kohberger entered through a sliding glass door on the 2nd floor, according to the evidence that would later be presented. His intention, prosecutors would argue, was murder. The house was dark and quiet. Inside, the 4 students slept, unaware of the nightmare about to unfold. Dylan Mortensen, one of the surviving roommates, was awakened by sounds she initially attributed to her roommate Kaylee playing with her dog. Then she heard what she thought was crying coming from Xana's room, and a male voice saying something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Mortensen opened her bedroom door and peered out into the hallway. What she saw would haunt her forever. A figure clad in black clothing and wearing a mask walked past her door. She later described him as approximately 5'10" or taller, with bushy eyebrows. The figure walked toward the sliding glass door and left. Mortensen, frozen in shock and fear, locked herself in her room. She had no idea that upstairs, in 2 different bedrooms, 4 of her friends were already dead or dying. It wasn't until nearly 8 hours later, shortly before noon, that the surviving roommates called 911.
911 location of your emergency.
Something is happening. Something happened in our house. We don't know what.
What is the address of the emergency?
1122.
What is the rest of the address?
Oh, Kings Road.
Okay. And is that a house or an apartment?
It's a house.
Can you repeat the address to make sure that I have it right?
I'll talk to you guys. We live at the White, so we're next to them.
I need someone to repeat the address for verification.
The address, 1122 King Road.
And what's the phone number that you're calling from?
What's your phone number?
And tell me exactly what's going on.
One of the roommates has passed out, and she was drunk last night and she's not waking up.
Okay.
Oh, and they saw some man in their house last night. Yeah. Sorry,
And are you with the patient? Okay, I need someone to keep the phone, stop passing it around.
Can I just tell you what happened pretty much?
What is going on currently? Is someone passed out right now?
I don't really know, but pretty much at 4 a.m.
Okay, I need to know what's going on right now if someone is passed out. Can you find that out?
Yeah, I'll come. Come on, Bethany, we gotta go check. But we have to. Is he passed out? She's not waking up.
Okay, one moment. I'm getting help started that way.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and how old is she?
She's 20.
20, you said?
Yes, 20 here to
Okay.
them.
Hello? Hello?
Okay, I need someone to stop passing the phone around because I've talked to 4 different people.
Okay, sorry, they just gave me the phone.
Is she breathing?
Hello?
Is she breathing?
No.
Okay.
You should talk to them, okay? I can't talk to them. I need you to talk to them.
Okay. Hello.
Okay. I've already sent the ambulance and law enforcement. Stay on the line. If there is a defibrillator available, send someone to get it now and tell me when you have it.
Say that again? There's a police here right now.
Okay. If there is a defibrillator available, send someone to get it now and tell me when you have it.
We don't have one. I think yes. Do you have a defibrillator? Yes, you have one.
Are you talking to the officer?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to let you go since he's there with you and can help you.
Okay.
When police arrived, they discovered a scene of unimaginable carnage. Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogan were found together in Kaylee's third-floor bedroom, both stabbed multiple times. On the second floor, Zana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin were found in Zana's room, also victims of brutal stab wounds. According to Latah County Coroner Kathy Mabbutt, all 4 died from multiple sharp force injuries. Some had defensive wounds, suggesting they had tried to fight back. 2 victims were so intoxicated they were unable to resist at all. The weapon, investigators determined, was likely a large fixed-blade knife, possibly military style. The crime scene told a story of calculated violence and chilling precision. Under Madison Mogen's body, investigators discovered a crucial piece of evidence: a leather knife sheath stamped with a United States Marine Corps logo. And on the metal snap, they found a single source of male DNA. That DNA would eventually lead them to Bryan Kohberger, but the path to his arrest would take weeks of intensive investigation and would involve cutting-edge forensic techniques that blurred the lines of privacy and genetic surveillance. The small college town of Moscow, Idaho, a community of approximately 25,000 people, was thrust into a state of fear and paranoia. The last murder in Moscow had been 5 years prior. This quadruple homicide was unprecedented. University of Idaho students were terrified. At least a quarter of the student body refused to return to campus after Thanksgiving break, and the university shifted to hybrid scheduling. Parents demanded answers. The media descended on the town like a swarm, turning the tragedy into a national obsession. Days turned into weeks with no arrest, and the community's anxiety intensified. Behind the scenes, law enforcement was working tirelessly. They collected surveillance footage from nearby businesses and homes. They analyzed phone records. They interviewed hundreds of people. They received tens of thousands of tips from the public. The investigation was exhaustive, but leads were scarce. Then, investigators began focusing on a white Hyundai Elantra that had been spotted near the crime scene around the time of the murders. Surveillance cameras captured the vehicle multiple times. It was a significant lead, but they needed to find the owner. Meanwhile, at Washington State University in Pullman, just a 15-minute drive across the state line from Moscow, Bryan Kohberger was continuing his graduate studies in criminology. On the surface, he appeared to be a dedicated student pursuing his Ph.D. He had completed his undergraduate and master's degrees in criminal justice at DeSales University in Pennsylvania before moving to Washington for his doctoral program. Those who knew him described him as intelligent, though somewhat socially awkward. His professors noted his interest in criminal psychology and forensic investigation. But beneath this academic exterior, investigators would later argue, was something far more sinister. Kohberger's background in criminology would become one of the most disturbing aspects of the case. As a master's student at DeSales University, he had written a 12-page paper for his forensic investigation course titled Crime Scene Scenario Final. The paper, which prosecutors would later seek to introduce as evidence, demonstrated his detailed knowledge of murder scene investigations. In the paper, Kohberger wrote about photographing a deceased woman in her living room, focusing on evidence of harm to her body, bruises on her face, marks on her neck, bloody clothing, and signs of post-mortem lividity. He wrote about defensive wounds, hesitation marks related to knife injuries, and multiple stab wounds. He emphasized the importance of swabbing under fingernails to collect the offender's DNA if the victim had dug into their skin during a struggle. The paper reads like a how-to guide for committing and investigating murder, and it mentions many of the same forensic methods that would later be used to identify Kohberger as a suspect. He stressed the need for thorough examination to discover and document even the smallest items at a crime scene. He wrote about the importance of collecting surveillance footage from the area. Here was a man who had studied the science of solving murders, who understood forensic evidence collection, who knew how investigators think, and yet, prosecutors would allege, he made critical mistakes that would lead to his capture. As December 2022 approached, investigators had narrowed their focus to the white Hyundai Elantra. They discovered that Bryan Kohberger owned such a vehicle and that he lived remarkably close to the crime scene. But they needed more than circumstantial evidence. They needed DNA. And that's when law enforcement employed a controversial technique called investigative genetic genealogy. The DNA from the knife sheath found at the crime scene had been run through traditional law enforcement databases with no match. So investigators turned to consumer genetic databases, where millions of Americans have voluntarily uploaded their DNA information to trace their ancestry. Through this genetic genealogy search, investigators identified potential relatives of the unknown suspect. The trail led them to Bryan Kohberger, but they needed a direct DNA sample to confirm the match. In late December, with Kohberger at his parents' home in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania for the holidays, investigators conducted surveillance. They obtained DNA from trash outside the Kohberger family residence, specifically a Q-tip that contained DNA matching Kohberger's father. This paternal DNA match provided the probable cause needed for an arrest warrant. On December 30th, 2022, 6 weeks after the murders, Pennsylvania State Police surrounded the Kohberger family home. Bryan Kohberger was taken into custody without incident. The arrest sent shockwaves through the true crime community that had been obsessively following the case. Here was a criminology PhD student, someone studying the very field that would ultimately lead to his downfall, arrested for one of the most heinous crimes in recent memory. During his time at his parents' home before his arrest, family members noticed bizarre behavior. According to sources, Kohberger was constantly wearing latex gloves, even inside the house. His sister allegedly became suspicious, loudly pointing out to other family members that at the time of the murders, her brother was living just a few miles from the crime scene, and that he drove a white Hyundai Elantra, the exact make and color at the center of the investigation. Whether the family contacted authorities or simply harbored private suspicions remains unclear, but the seeds of doubt had been planted within his own family. Once in custody, Kohberger's legal journey began. At his arraignment on May 22, 2023, Kohberger told the court he would stand silent, refusing to enter a plea. The court entered a not guilty plea on his behalf. His defense team, led by public defenders, immediately began mounting what would become an aggressive defense strategy. They filed motion after motion, challenging evidence, seeking to exclude witness testimony, and fighting against the prosecution's pursuit of the death penalty. The defense argued that Kohberger had autism spectrum disorder, a condition that his attorneys suggested should preclude him from being eligible for capital punishment. As the case progressed through the legal system, more evidence emerged that painted a damning picture. Prosecutors revealed that Kohberger's phone records showed his device had pinged off the cell tower serving the King Roadhouse approximately 23 times between July 9th and November 7th, 2022, during late night or early morning hours. This was after he had moved from Pennsylvania to Washington for his graduate program. Why was his phone repeatedly in the vicinity of that house at odd hours? The prosecution suggested he was stalking his future victims, surveilling the residence, planning his attack. Then came the revelation about the knife purchase. Prosecutors obtained a search warrant for Kohberger's Amazon shopping history, specifically his click activity pertaining to knives and accessories. The warrant covered the period from March 20th to March 30th, 2022, when Kohberger was still in Pennsylvania, completing his master's degree. The results were devastating for the defense. Amazon records showed that Kohberger had purchased a KABAR knife, sheath, and sharpener in March 2022, 8 months before the murders. The knife itself was never found. To this day, its location remains one of the case's greatest mysteries. But the sheath left at the crime scene, bearing Kohberger's DNA, connected him directly to the murder weapon. Legal experts called this evidence catastrophic for the defense. The timing, the specific type of knife, the subsequent searches, all suggested a level of premeditation that would be nearly impossible to explain away. As one Boise defense attorney noted, using a knife in a murder is particularly personal, and the timeline linking Kohberger to the weapon showed significant premeditation. Additional evidence continued to mount. Investigators seized Kohberger's white Hyundai Elantra, and found it had been meticulously cleaned. Prosecutor Bill Thompson would later describe the car as immaculate, with even typically dirty areas like side door compartments spotless. This intensive cleaning, Thompson argued, was part of Kohberger's plan to destroy evidence. When investigators searched Kohberger's apartment in Pullman 6 to 8 weeks after the murders, they found it virtually empty. Everything had been removed. It appeared Kohberger had systematically eliminated any potential evidence. Prosecutors also revealed that they had surveillance footage and records tracking Kohberger's movements on the night of the murders. His phone went dark, likely turned off, around the time he left his apartment. Camera footage captured a vehicle matching his Elantra, traveling toward Moscow in the early morning hours. After the murders, cameras showed him taking a series of back roads to return to Pullman, avoiding major highways where more cameras might capture his license plate. The prosecution's timeline placed him at the scene of the crime during the window when the murders occurred. The case garnered intense media attention and spawned an entire cottage industry of true crime content. Books were written, documentaries were produced, podcasts dissected every detail. Online sleuths combed through social media posts and public records, sometimes recklessly identifying innocent people as potential suspects. The University of Idaho eventually demolished the house at 1122 King Road, unable to find any productive use for a structure that had become a grim tourist attraction and a constant reminder of tragedy. A healing garden and memorial were established on campus to honor the 4 victims. As jury selection approached, scheduled for August 2025, the case had been moved from Latah County to Ada County in Boise to ensure a fair trial. A wide-ranging gag order prevented attorneys, witnesses, and family members from discussing the case publicly, leaving many questions unanswered. The families of the victims were divided in their desires. Some wanted the death penalty pursued vigorously. Others, exhausted by the delays and legal maneuvering, sought closure. The Goncalves family, particularly Kaylee's father Steve, was outspoken about his frustration with what he called a hamster wheel of motions, hearings, and delayed decisions. Then, in late June 2025, everything changed. News broke that Bryan Kohberger had agreed to a plea deal. The announcement came suddenly, catching even the victims' families off guard. On July 1st, Moscow prosecuting attorney Bill Thompson sent a letter to the families informing them of the deal. The Goncalves family was furious, posting on Facebook that they had no idea the plea deal was happening and calling it very unexpected. They described feeling betrayed by the state of Idaho, expressing that this was not the justice they had sought for their daughter. The plea agreement was straightforward but controversial. Kohberger would plead guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. In exchange, the death penalty would be taken off the table. He would receive 4 consecutive life sentences for the murders and a maximum of 10 years for burglary. He would waive his right to appeal. He would spend the rest of his life in an Idaho prison. For some families, this was acceptable. Madison Mogen's family, through their attorney, expressed support for the deal, valuing the certainty of a life sentence over the risk and trauma of a lengthy trial. Ethan Chapin's family also indicated their support, but the Goncalves family felt differently. Steve Goncalves stood outside the courthouse before the hearing and told reporters, "It's sad, it's disgusting, and I can't pretend like this is justice." He later added that 4 life sentences amounted to daycare, and that prison was daycare. The family had contacted prosecutors on Tuesday, asking for the deal to be amended to include a full confession and the location of the murder weapon. Prosecutors declined, explaining that an offer already accepted by the defendant could not ethically be changed. The divide among the families highlighted the complexity of victims' rights and the impossible task of satisfying everyone's need for justice. On July 2, 2025, The courtroom in Boise was packed. Media members had been explicitly instructed not to show emotion. Family members filled the gallery, their eyes locked on Kohberger as he entered. He greeted his defense team and his parents with a wide smile before taking his seat, a gesture that struck many as disturbingly inappropriate given the circumstances. Judge Hippler began the hearing by asking Kohberger a series of yes or no questions to establish that he was entering the plea willingly and with a clear mind. "Are you thinking clearly?" the judge asked. "Yes," Kohberger responded. "Have you been promised anything in exchange for this plea?" "No." "Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?" "Yes." Throughout the questioning, Kohberger showed little emotion. His defense attorneys have attributed his flat affect to autism spectrum disorder, but to observers in the courtroom, particularly the victims' families, his demeanor seemed cold and unfeeling. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Judge Hippler asked Kohberger if he entered the residence at 1122 King Road on November 13, 2022, with the intent to commit murder. "Yes." "Did he kill Kaylee Goncalves?" "Yes." "Did he kill Madison Mogen?" "Yes." "Did he kill Zana Kernodle?" "Yes." "Did he kill Ethan Chapin?" "Yes." 5 simple words that ended 30 months of denial and legal posturing. 5 words that confirmed what prosecutors had maintained from the beginning. After Kohberger's guilty pleas were entered, Prosecutor Bill Thompson stood to present a summary of the evidence the state would have introduced at trial. His voice was emotional as he read the victims' names. Thompson revealed details that had been kept under seal due to the gag order. He confirmed that Kohberger had purchased the KABAR knife from Amazon 8 months before the murders. He outlined the cell phone evidence showing Kohberger's repeated presence near the victim's home in the months leading up to the attack. He described how surveillance footage tracked Kohberger's vehicle traveling to and from Moscow on the night of the murders. Thompson provided a timeline of Kohberger's movements through the house. He entered through the sliding glass door on the 2nd floor. Prosecutors believe he went upstairs first, where he encountered and killed Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogen in Kaylee's bedroom. He then went back downstairs to the 2nd floor, where he encountered Zana Kernodle in the hallway. Thompson implied that Kohberger may not have originally intended to kill Zana, but ended up doing so. Ethan Chapin, who was asleep in Zana's room, was also killed, though the specific details of his murder were not fully explained. Most haunting of all, Dylan Mortensen, the surviving roommate who saw the masked figure, was not targeted at all. No explanation was given for why she was spared. Thompson emphasized that prosecutors still do not know whether Kohberger entered the home intending to kill all 4 students, or if the body count escalated beyond his original plan. "We will not represent that he intended to commit all of the murders that he did that night," Thompson stated, "but we know that is what resulted." This admission raised more questions than it answered. If he didn't intend to kill all 4, who was his target? Was it one of the women? Was the plan always to commit murder, with the specific victims determined by circumstance? These questions, like so many others in this case, may never be fully answered.